French and Indian War. The French and the Indians faced off against the British and the colonists. They went to war over unrest and trade disputes in America. The Albany Plan of Union stated that Benjamin Franklin wanted the colonies to unite. This was the first attempt in uniting the colonies, and it also did not pass because the locals did not want to give up the power they had. The British ended up winning and were declared the victors through the Treaty of Paris of 1763. The Treaty of Paris gave all the land of Canada to Britain, as well as all the French land east of the Mississippi River, including 2 small islands in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Britain also gained Florida. The British wanted to make sure that they were allowed peace in the Ohio Valley region, and so they issued the Proclamation of 1763, which stated that the colonists could not settle west of the Appalachian Mountains, although they had fought for this land and won this land. This would start the road to the Revolution and many acts that would lead up to the Revolutionary War.
Sugar Act 1764 was a law that placed tax on sugar, molasses, and other products containing sugar. First tax to raise money for the colonies. Colonial leaders claimed that the Parliament had no right to tax the colonists. Samuel Adams founded the Committee of Correspondence in response to the Sugar Act. The Sugar Act affected rum producers and wealthy people the most. Put a 3-cent tax on each gallon of molasses entered the colony. 1766 tax on molasses lowered to 1 cent a gallon. The Sugar Act was strictly enforced and had harsh punishment of smugglers. Greenville, King George's chief cabinet minister, wanted to increase Britain's income from the colonies, so he thought of the Sugar Act. The colonists said taxation without representation is tyranny.
The Stamp Act of 1765. The Stamp Act mandated the use of stamped paper or the affixing of stamps, certifying payment of tax. This was issued right after the French and Indian War to help raise money that the British lost due to paying for troops and supplies in a distant overseas war. The Stamp Act affected all citizens because everyone had to pay at least one tax through the stamp, either through a birth certificate or a death certificate.
The Recording Act was passed by Parliament on March 24, 1765. It was an act that said the colonists must house British soldiers and provide them with all necessities. This act did not affect everyone in the colonies, just colonists in big cities and urban areas such as New York and Boston. This act was very important because King George III decided to keep 10,000 British soldiers in the colonies in case a war broke out. Passing the Recording Act was meant to save British money. The colonists despised the act, but the British claimed that they were protecting the colonists from the French. The colonists didn't consider the French to be a threat. Therefore, they didn't like the idea of paying for British protection. The Recording Act was one of the many laws passed with the Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts were in response to the Boston Tea Party. Some of the other laws that fell under the Intolerable Acts were Boston Port Bill and the Administration of Justice Act. The Recording Act made the colonists feel as if they were being governed by the British Army, which they did not desire. Thus, the local militias and Minutemen became more important to the colonists.
Townshend Act, 1767. It's 1767. Our king is King George III. He keeps passing all these unfair acts and laws. My husband has to keep going to all these different wars, and I can barely feed and nourish my own kids. Oh no, another speech. Here come the messengers.
King George III has passed a new act called the Townshend Act. This act is placing duties on glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea.
Oh my, these things are getting very expensive. I've heard there's another way to get those things cheaper. We can just smuggle them in there.
Let's try it.
We can't do that. Anymore, at least. What were we thinking? They'll find us now.
Why not? It's worth it. Stop being afraid.
Writs of assistance.
Oh yeah, they can search our homes without permission at any time for smuggled goods.
Seriously? Without permission? At any time? What?
Yeah, unfair, isn't it? I'm upset about it.
How will I feed my kids? They'll be taken away. John is at war again. This is going too far.
I agree. It's going way too far.
I'm really upset too, especially because it's taking power away from the colonial government.
Let's just respond by boycotting British goods.
I wish we could avoid buying paper, but we have to for a birth and death certificate.
You're right. We have to buy paper at least twice in our lives. We're done.
On March 5th, 1770, at 9 o'clock, the colonist was having an argument with the soldier, and he struck him, and soon after that, more colonists gathered around, and he called for more soldiers, and then after that, they started calling, the colonists started, like, names were called, and like they threw snowballs at each other, and then the soldiers, they started shooting, and three men were killed
Instantly.
and
And then 2 more men died a few days later. Alright, so the Sons of Liberty were actually, while they mourned the deaths, they were actually pretty happy about this because they could use it as propaganda against the British to get a rise out of patriots to help start the revolution. As you can see, some might actually call it the first battle of the revolution because it was such a tragic event. Paul Revere made this painting of the Bloody Massacre and printed it in newspapers across the colonies. The British, however, didn't really get any benefits from it. Because of this, they had to go to trial to ease some of the colonists' worries. 2 soldiers were convicted of manslaughter. Their names were Hugh Montgomery and Matthew Kilroy. Instead of going to jail, they took kind of a pardon, and they just got a brand on their thumbs and were cast out of the British Army.
The passing of this act in 1773 allowed the British East India Company to sell tea directly to the colonists by force. This whole act was made because the colonists were smuggling tea in from the Netherlands, which hurt the British East India Company financially. They asked Parliament for help, which in turn is how this came to be.
The British East India Company had a surplus of tea, but couldn't sell it directly, and when they passed this act, it gave them the green light. Lord North was the King's chief minister in 1770, and he believed the colonists would buy the cheaper British tea, and thereby acknowledge Parliament's right to tax them. This was the only part of the Townshend Act that did not get repealed.
Samuel Adams led the resistance against this on December 16, 1773, and committed the Boston Tea Party.
The colonists feared what would happen next, which leads them to the Intolerable Acts.
Today in class, we're going to talk about the Boston Tea Party.
This was a protest against the Tea Act in which a group of colonists called the Sons of Liberty dressed up and disguised themselves as Indians, snuck aboard 3 British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into the Boston Harbor.
There were 3 ships aboarded that night, the Beaver, the Eleanor, and the Dartmouth. The Sons of Liberty demanded the ships to leave. Unsure what to do, the ships stayed there, and later that night, the Boston Tea Party took place.
Accounts say that the harbor had a tint of brown that night, like someone was brewing tea in the water. The harbor was later nicknamed the Teapot after this event.
Enraged, King George closed down the harbor until the cost of the tea was fully paid for.
This is the Boston Harbor on December 16, 1773.
These are the Sons of Liberty,
That's a chest of tea.
and this is one of the 3 ships called the Beaver.
Who did the Intolerable Acts? There were 5 acts. They were to punish the colonists. The first one was the Boston Port Act, which discharged the Boston Harbor, which they closed it down so that you couldn't have like imports and exports coming in or going out. The second one was the Massachusetts Government Act, which effectively aborted the existing charters of the Massachusetts Bay, and that since they closed the charters, they also couldn't get exports or imports.
The third one is the Administration of Justice Act. The act authorized the governor of Massachusetts to move trials of royal officials accused of committing capital offenses while performing their official duties. If he believed the accused would not receive a fair trial. The fourth one was the Glittering Act, which reassured the colonies to house and feed the British soldiers. The fifth one is the Quebec Act, which was a rule impacted by the House or the British Parliament to set a new authority of Quebec.
Okay, we go to the First Continental Congress. Boycotted British goods. It was a gathering of colonial leaders who were deeply troubled about the relationship between Great Britain and its colonies in America. In July 1776, the colonies adopted the Declaration of Independence. Georgia was the only colony that didn't attend. They didn't seek separation from Britain. If the king refused the petition, they agreed to meet again in 1775. Delegates had strict orders to seek peace. They met from September 5th to October 26th. They remained locked in the weeks of intense debates, and it took place at Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia. In 1774, the colonies held the First Continental Congress. Representatives from each colony, except Georgia, met in Philadelphia. The governor in Georgia succeeded in blocking delegates from being sent to the Congress. The representatives gathered to discuss what they thought about the British intolerable acts. They met to discuss their relationship with Britain. They wanted to appear as united colonies in their response to Britain. The purpose of the First Continental Congress was not to seek independence from Britain.
The First Continental Congress meeting. The Congress had three objectives: to compose a statement of colonial rights, to identify British parliaments, and to provide a plan that would convince Britain to restore those rights. The members agreed to boycott British goods. They also agreed to meet again in May 1775 if the British did not change their policies. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary, but when will we be stronger? Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. I know that course may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry quoted eyewitnesses and others.
Our group had Lexington and Concord. On the day of April 18, 1775, around the world a shot was heard. In Lexington, 8 Minutemen lie dead with another 10 injured, but only one redcoat was stanger at that battle. What led up to this, you might ask? A stockpile of weapons in Concord. Although the British were going to retrieve the weapons, none were taken, for they were hidden by a warning. Who warned them was a son of liberty named Paul Revere. You have heard the name, I assume, and you instantly thought of, the British are coming, the British are coming. And the British did indeed come, but not before Paul Revere did. He rode to Lexington to warn them, and he got there before the British, and 70 Minutemen were there waiting for the 700 British. There was a quick skirmish which resulted in 8 Minutemen dead, 10 injured Minutemen, and 1 injured redcoat. After this, the British had enough and just went to Concord where the weapons were hidden. They got there too late. All the weapons had been hidden because a rider had warned them of their coming, like how Paul Revere did with Lexington. Paul Revere was not the rider for this because he was captured, so another rider was sent. The British got mad that they couldn't find any weapons, so they set a few buildings on fire. This made the Patriots angry, so in return they ambushed the redcoats and killed many of them, but suffered some casualties of their own. This was the first battle of the Revolutionary War. It was the shot heard around the world. The shot heard around the world in Lexington Concord's battle.
The guard that was looking out for the British troops was told that if he saw the enemy troops, then he would need to signal Paul Revere and William Dawes so they could warn Concord of the dangers that the redcoats were coming. He was to warn them by lighting 1 torch if they came by land and 2 torches if they came by sea. 2 lanterns were lit that night, which sent Paul and William off on the midnight ride.
Hello. We did our booth project over the Second Continental Congress.
They met in May of 1775 and there were 12 delegates.
They signed the Olive Branch Petition, and they elected George Washington as the General of the Continental Army.
They encouraged the colonies to adopt a new Republican government, and the delegates of note were Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Hancock.
They approved the Declaration of Independence and adopted it on July 4th, 1776.
They united the colonies for a fight and authorized the Massachusetts Militia.
Today, we are going to talk about the Battle of Trenton and Bunker Hill. First, we will talk about Bunker Hill. It was the bloodiest battle of the war. The British won, but the colonies fought well and proved that they could defeat the British. Because the colonists were low on gunpowder, a commander ordered them not to fire until they saw the whites of their eyes. What's funny is this battle took place at Breed's Hill, yet it is called the Battle of Bunker Hill. First, Arnold and his troops captured Fort Ticonderoga and its weapons. They then fought inside Boston. Then the colonists waited at Bunker Hill. This battle occurred in June 1775. 1,000 plus British and 400 colonists killed or wounded. Thousands of colonists besieged British soldiers at Boston. Colonists defended Breed's Hill while Britain attacked from below. The British kept dying and the colonists kept using ammo. Until they ran out, they were okay. British won because of the colonists' lack of ammo.
Mr. Mitchell, hey, Mr. Mitchell, what are we doing today?
Oh, we're gonna learn about common sense, but in a more interesting way than normal.
How is that?
Well, we're gonna go time travel and actually meet Thomas Paine.
On the Magic School Bus?
Yeah.
Let's go!
We're here. He's over there. You go meet him. I'm gonna stay on the bus and wait.
Let me get my time period gear on. Okay. Hey, Thomas, hey, what are you doing?
I'm not sure if I know this guy, but he's creeping me out. I'm just writing.
Didn't you write like a book before or something?
Well, I wrote a pamphlet. A book? Ain't nobody got time for that.
Wasn't it like 52 pages?
47 to be exact.
Oh, 47. Why did you write like 47?
Well, the book was, reasons we should break away from Britain, and I could only think of 47 pages worth.
Oh, why did you publish it anonymously?
Well, the ideas in the book were considered treason by Britain, and that's punishable by death.
Oh, well, good thing you did that.
Yeah.
Well, I knew that. I was just, I don't know. So, do you remember any part of your book?
Oh, yes, I'm glad you asked. My favorite quote from the whole book was, "It's absurd, the idea of a continent being perpetually governed by an island." Pretty good, huh?
That's my favorite quote. I've never read any of his pamphlet. I knew that. I love that quote.
Yeah, that must be why I sold 500 copies of it.
Do I get one for free?
Well,
I'm sure you have a few to spare.
I guess.
Can you sign it?
Sign it? Why?
Because I like your name, Thomas.
Okay. Wow, that makes me feel real special. I signed it anonymous.
Oh, thank you. That's my mom when I get home. She's gonna be real proud. So, can I call you Thomas and we're friends now?
No. Remember, keep your patriotism up, kids.
Well, look what time it is. According to the sundial, I better get going back to class.
Okay, I'll keep writing. Did you enjoy your field trip, kids?
Yes. Thomas Paine was a really cool guy. He wrote this really cool book called Common Sense, and it's like 47 pages, and it was really good, and it helped convince them to break away from Britain, and I know a lot now.
All right.
The Declaration of Independence was and still is a major influence to America. It led to many positive and negative effects. It also inspired other countries to be who they want to be.
Some of the main authors were Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Roger Sherman, and Livingston. These few people were in a secret society called the Sons of Liberty.
They all agreed that Great Britain was getting too powerful.
Thomas Jefferson and the Sons of Liberty got together to discuss the writing of a set of laws. Thomas Jefferson locked himself in a hot, misty room in June and wrote for hours. When he returned, he had written the Declaration, and it was now ready to be edited.
Since the moment of creation, the Declaration of Independence has been seen as the birth of America. It marked the point where the colonists were at their best. Some causes and effects of it were:
Causes was Stamp Act of 1765, Townshend Acts of 1767, Tea Act of 1773, to have a say in government, give people opportunities to make their own choices, produce policies to help them, not hurt them.
Some effects were that it led to the Revolutionary War, it gave America independence, had a large effect on the Bill of Rights, it influenced other countries to stand up for what they thought was right, and it brought about the Emancipation Proclamation.
Now we will talk about the Battle of Trenton. Patriots escaped to safety from the British by crossing the Delaware on Christmas. Patriots crossed the Delaware and marched all night. The colonists knew the British and Germans had been drinking and were passed out, so they took hostages the next morning.
Battle of Saratoga. Turning point of the Revolutionary War. This was a major patriot victory. It happened October 17, 1777. This will make a brilliant page of American history. That quote was said by James Thackeray. Before the Battle of Saratoga, there was 2 defeats.
This caused the French and Spain to help. Before this, French and Spain lost a lot of land to the British.
Collages of a British general handing over his sword in surrender to a patriot general.
The Battle of Yorktown and the Treaty of Paris, 1783.
The Battle of Yorktown, 1781, the last major battle of the Revolutionary War, involved the British, the colonists, and the French.
Patriots were really low on money, so they couldn't pay the soldiers and they couldn't buy supplies. They needed help from foreign allies. They wanted it to end the war, but it didn't like they had hoped it would. The Patriots had another bad turn when Benedict Arnold turned traitor against them.
The British held most of the South, Pennsylvania, and New York. General Charles Cornwallis moved 7,200 men to Yorktown, Virginia. General George Washington ordered Lafayette to trap Cornwallis by land. He then got surrounded by
16,000 men. French naval fleet got control of the Chesapeake Bay. British ships couldn't rescue Cornwallis, and so he sent a drummer and a soldier with a white flag on October 19, 1781. Patriots took 8,000 prisoners, and the Prime Minister of Lord North ended it, saying, "It is all over now."
Richard Oswald represented the British government. Statesmen Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, John Jay represented the United States. The Treaty of Paris was signed in Paris, a mutual land between all of them.
Congress approved this treaty in April of 1783. The treaty was then signed later that year in September. The treaty recognized the independence of the United States and formed new nation borders such as
The U.S. territory was west of the Mississippi, the north to Canada, the east to the Atlantic, and south to Florida. They restored the land back to the Loyalists taken from them during the war.
And then we're acting out the Battle of Yorktown. Go around me. And I get taken. And then the Treaty of Paris. I am Benjamin Franklin, John J. Adams, and John J. and John Adams, and for the United States.
I am Richard Oswald. And
Some nights I stay up, cashing in my bad luck. Some nights I call it a draw. Some nights I wish that my lips could build a castle. Some nights I wish they just fall off. But I still wake up, I still see your ghost. Oh Lord, I'm